A trapper working a line off the Housatonic in western Connecticut told me something a few years back that stuck with me. He said he'd run that country for 30 years and never cut a bobcat track before about 2009. Now he cuts them every week, in snow, in mud, right up against the tree line behind houses where kids wait for the school bus. And he's not wrong, and he's not alone. I'm going to lay out for you exactly what's happening because this one's real. This isn't a story about whether the animal's out there. The counts say yes. The story's about timing. Why a cat that spent 100 years learning to disappear from people started walking into backyards from Connecticut to California in the same 15-year window, and why the 4 explanations everybody reaches for each fall apart the second you try to stretch them across the whole continent. Let's start with the animal, because most people have never actually seen one clean, and that matters more than you'd think. The bobcat, Lynx rufus, is the most widely distributed wildcat in North America. It ranges across an estimated 47 of the lower 48 states. The only holdout's a sliver of intensively farmed ground in the Midwest, and even that's arguable now. So when I say this animal is everywhere, I mean it in a literal, mapped, documented sense. It's under your assumptions right now. Here's the part that trips people up. An adult bobcat weighs somewhere between 15 and 35 pounds. That's it. A big male in good country tops out around what a stout beagle weighs. A female off the lower Colorado might run 15, 16 pounds soaking wet. So it's only about twice the size of a large house cat, and that's the whole problem with sightings. Somebody sees a short-tailed cat at 40 feet in bad light, and half the time they call it a mountain lion, and the other half they call it a stray tom. It's neither. You've probably walked past one, it let you. I've stood over fresh bobcat tracks in wet snow up a drainage in the San Juans in Colorado, and I've watched a perfectly sharp adult call them coyote. Round track. No claw marks because the claws retract, roughly 2 inches across. Once you've seen it, you can't unsee it. But almost nobody's been shown. So here's the first number that should stop you. The bobcat population in North America is now believed to exceed 3.5 million animals. In the late 1970s, the estimates ran between 700,000 and 1 million. Hold those two next to each other, from under 1 million to over 3.5 million in about 40 years. That's not a rebound. That's an explosion, a quiet one, in an animal built to never be seen doing it. 3.5 million. And most people couldn't tell you they'd ever seen one. So if the animal was nearly wiped down to 1 million, what pulled the trigger on the recovery? This is where it gets interesting, because the first cause is the one everybody names, and it's the weakest. In 1976, the bobcat got listed under CITES Appendix 2. That's an international trade control. It came in because the world's spotted cat furs were collapsing, and buyers turned to the bobcat's pelt as a substitute. At the peak of that market in the early 1980s, the U.S. fur trade was shipping over 90,000 bobcat pelts a year. 90,000. A year. Out of a population that might have been under 1 million. Do that math and you'll see why numbers cratered. Then the market died. Average pelt prices fell from over $130 in the early 1980s to under $20 within a decade. Fashion moved on, the anti-fur wave hit, and the economic reason to trap a bobcat evaporated. Trappers hung it up, pressure came off, and the population started to climb. Clean story, right? Fur market collapses, cat recovers, and look, the trappers are right about this part. Take 90,000 animals a year off the top and stop. And yes, numbers come back. That's real. But here's why it's the weakest explanation, and I want to be honest with you about it before anyone else picks it apart. The fur collapse was national. It happened everywhere at once in the mid-'80s. If that were the whole engine, you'd expect the recovery to look the same everywhere. It doesn't. The cat came roaring back into New England 20 years after the market died, and it barely moved in parts of the Deep South where trapping pressure was just as low. Same cause, wildly different results. That tells you something else is doing the heavy lifting. Not enough to explain the timing. Not enough to explain the geography. So what else? Second force, prey. And this one's got teeth. Across the eastern half of the continent, the white-tailed deer population went vertical over the same window. Suburban development chopped forests into edge, the exact brushy, broken cover where deer thrive and where bobcats hunt best. A bobcat mostly eats rabbits and rodents, but it'll take a fawn. And more than that, an exploding deer herd means an exploding everything else. More edge, more cottontails, more voles, more mice. A female bobcat's home range can be as tight as 2 square miles when the food's rich. In poor country, a male needs over 30. Flood the landscape with prey, and every one of those ranges shrinks. And shrinking ranges means more cats packed into the same ground, breeding faster, surviving winter. I've walked the edge habitat outside Hartford where this plays out. Overgrown fence line, a strip of second growth behind a subdivision, a retention pond thick with cattails. That's a Bobcat supermarket. It's also 40 yards from someone's deck. The cat didn't move toward people. The people built prime Bobcat habitat and moved toward the cat. Third force, and this one's quieter. Winter. Bobcats hit a wall in deep, sustained snow. They're not built like their bigger cousin, the Canada lynx, with those snowshoe feet. A bobcat sinks. In hard winters up north, they starve or they don't push in at all. Historically, that's what kept them out of northern New England, upstate New York, the upper Midwest. Now string together a run of milder winters, shallower snowpack, shorter cold snaps. Suddenly the northern doors open. The cat walks through. Some years the snow up in the northeast kingdom of Vermont runs deep enough to hold them back. Some years it doesn't. And the years it doesn't have been stacking up. That's why the range maps are already out of date. Bobcats are being documented in northern counties that showed blank on the official maps a decade ago. The map says absent. The porch camera says otherwise. Fourth force, us. Specifically, the suburban edge itself as habitat. Here's the thing nobody wants to sit with. A bobcat is not a wilderness animal in the way people assume. It's an edge specialist. It wants the seam between cover and opening, because that's where the hunting is. A golf course backed by woods, a greenbelt threading through a subdivision in the hills above Los Angeles, a drainage corridor cutting through Dallas-Fort Worth. We didn't push the bobcat out to the wild margins. We built 10,000 miles of new margin, and the cat colonized it. There's a well-documented population living inside greater Los Angeles, moving through culverts and under freeways, denning in brush a quarter mile from 8-lane traffic. They've been tracked crossing under the 101. These aren't lost animals, they're residents. They've folded the city into a home range. So now you've got four forces: fur pressure gone, prey exploding, winters softening, edge habitat multiplying. And here's the confusing part, the part that's honest. No single one of them explains the national pattern. The fur collapse was too early and too uniform. The deer boom is an eastern story more than a western one. The mild winters matter up north and mean nothing in Texas. The suburban edge is everywhere, but it filled in at different rates. 4 causes. 0 of them sufficient alone. That's not a failure of the science. That's the actual shape of the answer. Because what happened isn't one cause. It's a collision. All 4 forces overlapping in roughly the same 15-year window, each one dominant in a different region, all of them pointing the same direction at once. In New England, it was winters plus deer. In California, it was edge habitat plus prey. In the Midwest, it was the fur collapse finally cashing out. The reason no one can hand you a clean, single explanation is that there isn't one. There's a stack, and the stack is regional, and it all resolved at the same time. I want to be straight with you about what's still contested, because even the people who study this full-time don't fully agree on the weighting. Some argue the fur collapse is the foundation, and everything else is a multiplier. Others say prey abundance is the real driver, and the fur trade is a footnote. They're looking at the same 3.5 million animals and reading different engines behind them. That disagreement is not weakness. It's the honest edge of a question that's still open. Here's what I keep coming back to, standing in that edge cover outside Hartford. We spent a century assuming this animal needed us gone to survive. The story we told was retreat, push the predator to the far country, keep it out of the yard. And the bobcat quietly rewrote it. It figured out that the messy seam we build around every town we make, the fence line, the greenbelt, the drainage, the overgrown lot, is better hunting than the deep wild ever was. So the real question isn't why we keep seeing bobcats. We know why. The maps are catching up to a population that tripled while we weren't watching. The real question is bigger and stranger. How many other animals we've written off as shy, as vanishing, as needing wilderness, are actually right here, packed into the edges we built, waiting on the exact stack of conditions that lets them come back? The bobcat isn't the exception. It might be the first one we noticed. That trapper off the Housatonic still runs his line. He told me he doesn't set for cats anymore. No money in the pelt, and honestly, he said, he likes knowing they're back there. He cuts the track every week now. Round, clawless, 2 inches across, filling slow with snow in the last light. He doesn't need to see the animal. It's out there in the edge, 40 yards off the deck, watching the country it never actually left. You've walked past one. It let you.